So yeah, this is November 2025. We're going to show you the home. This is the home where the plantation shutters. There's the location exposed to the sun and rain and gutters. This is some damage. You can see here at the top, it's pretty shot. So we're going to have to remove these tops. This is the back side. You can see the back sides aren't too bad. Those are up against the house, but there's still some damage at the top. The bottoms were out of align. We're going to need to square those up. And this is the second panel. You can see is a little bit worse off than the first one. There's a lot of rot there. As you can see, the slats were pretty bad and loose, a lot of rot and damage. And as you can see, as I turn them around, there's a lot of rot. The tops of these will be removed, but yeah, it's pretty bad. So these tops got to come off and be replaced with new slats. So I'm at Bob Black's garage. He's got quite a bit of tools and stuff, and we have these laid on his bench. You can see both of the shutters laying there, one with the front side and the other one with the back side. The back side you can see doesn't have as much damage, but they still are going to have to be repaired. So the first thing we wanted to do was try to line up the routing to match the existing routing that's on the existing shutters. So we're experimenting here, trying to get the right bit. As I walk over to these shutters, you can see we're trying to match up this routing line right there, because we're going to be chopping the top of these off. So now we're squaring up the shutters. They were not square. We wanted to make sure that they were completely square before we started any work. And once we had those squared up, we were obviously going to glue them and screw them down. You can see the long clamps that we use to get everything squared. It was quite a process. Titebond 3 is the glue that we were using to secure these and glue them down. You can see the top, that's where we're going to make the cut right there. We're cutting it right there. So again, we're adding the glue into every crack we can find with this Titebond 3. And then once we get this all glued down, we know we've got it pretty much squared and aligned. And once we get the clamps on it, then we're going to clamp it down and screw it. We're checking the square one last time now that we've got the glue in, and things look pretty square to us. If anything, it might be off maybe less than 1/16 of an inch, but for how old these are, that's a pretty good challenge. Next, we're going to be taking these long screws, and we're going to be screwing into the bottoms. There'll be 2 on each side. And we're pre-drilling just a little bit, and then we're putting screws in to make these last a lot longer. And once we've got the screws in, now we're just doing a final check, and then we just repeat the same step for the other slat. The next step will be setting up the top rail in both left and right styles. Now the scrap wood we were using was a little bit too wide, so we grabbed some measurements there as we needed to trim off some of the width there. And then of course we also trimmed off the top rail. You can see here is an example of how they're going to be put together. And we repeat the same thing for the second shutter. Now the second one, we're not taking off as much on the top, so one is smaller than the other. Then we're going to clamp these together, put a couple screws to hold them, and we still also got to router them. Next we gotta cut the tops off. And Bob has a way of marking these. You know, he'll put 2 lines, 1 line, 3 lines, 4 lines. So when we put them back together, they'll all match up. Now we're gonna router the pieces to match the existing shutters. And we'll do this on both sides and on both pieces. You can see Bob just flipping it around. And we're gonna be routing the same side here again. And like I said, we did this on both. Obviously, we'll have to take these apart again. That's why we marked them with the pencil once we have to start working on the insides. And a little sanding never hurts. You can see here, it turned out pretty nice. The routing matches up pretty good. I'll set it up here. You can see that it's gonna work out just fine. Now we're taking another piece of scrap wood because we gotta make these slats. So we're gonna cut these long pieces here and then cut them down to a thinner piece. We're using the existing slat to use as a guide to make sure we get the thickness right. Once we got that, then we start making our thin, long pieces of slats that we will trim down later. So you can see after we're done right here, we have quite a few long pieces that are the correct size and width, and then we'll just eventually cut those down to size. But we got the slats ready to go. They look pretty good. Okay, now we're going to remove the old tops of the shutters. You can see we already made the new pieces, so we're just matching them up to make sure we're got them right. You can see on the inside the angled holes that the slats fit into. That's going to be that was probably the most challenging thing we had to do later on. But for right now, we're just taking off the tops and we're just checking the measurements to make sure that we get those cut right. Now Bob's going to set up the cut and get the measurement right, and we're just cutting the tops off. And later on we did toss that top, but we ended up taking it back out because we needed to use that inside piece as a template, which we'll get back to later. And you can see that the new top fits pretty good. Now this is a biscuit joiner, and these are little biscuits. And this is what Bob wanted to use to attach the new top to the existing shutter. And it'll make a cut there at the top there. And this is the biscuit joiner, where he'll just make that little cut. You can see the holes that are there and the biscuits fit inside. And you can see you just tap those in there, and then on the old shutters, they'll just slide right in there. Now he's cutting the tops of the existing shutters using the biscuit joiner. And it's a quick and easy system to use. It probably took us more time setting up than it did to actually make the cut. And then they just fit right into the slot. And of course these will be glued later and clamped down to keep in place. But so far everything is working as planned. Now we come back to this piece I took back out of the trash. So we have to make a template to match these ones, and we didn't have a jig to use. So I copied them with my printer, and you can see here they have to match up the left angle to the right angle. So I took them back and glued them onto a scrap piece of wood to test. And after making a few tests, we were pretty successful. Here we're marking how many of those we actually need. And then we also got to mark the angle. You can see Bob's marking the angle of where those holes need to be for the slats to fit inside. We used a drill to make these holes. Like I said, we didn't have any kind of a jig or anything, so this was the method that we came up with. And then of course we had to use a chisel to chisel out each and individual one of the holes for the slats to fit into. So yeah, this looks like it's a long process, but like I said, back in the old days, I'm sure they had a jig that made all these in one shot. Now we're going to work on those slats that we had, and we're just cutting them to size. And once we get all these cut, then we'll go from there. And we made extras just in case. You know, it's always good to have extras. Now we got to see if the slats actually fit into these holes that we made. There you can see, this is a sample. It's not, this is how it will look, but it's not done because we got to glue each and individual slat into each hole. And this was tricky because, you know, putting in the glue, putting in the slats, and then putting the top on, trying to align everything and get it in there before everything dried up was quite a task, but we made it happen. And this is the top part that we're gluing now. That's going to go on the other side of that one piece laying there on the counter. And we just had to line them up. Bob is gluing the joints, or I guess maybe called the butt joint of that, because those got to be screwed too. So we glue those and screw them down. Everything's been glued and screwed. Now we're just kind of wiping off the glue. You can see the biscuit joint there. That will go right there to the top. Of course, that will be glued too. Now we're just setting it here on top just to see how it looks. And it's going to fit quite nice. So now that we're done with both of these, we clamped the tops to glue them down after we got all of the slats aligned, and this is the other one we've clamped down, and now we're just waiting for them to be glued and dried. So now we're all done. So I brought them back. They're just standing up here. Obviously the last thing to do is for me to take them back to the painter and let the painter finish prepping these, you know, sanding off the remaining loose paint. I took a lot of the loose paint off myself with a wire brush, but they could probably take off some more. I was thinking about using some type of paint remover, but I don't want to mess with it. It gets too messy. The back sides here look pretty good. I still would sand them and prep them and prime them and then paint them before they put them up. And these here should last another 80 years. I mean, thanks to Bob Black and his work, we were able to restore these. And I did send these to the other guys, and they were pretty impressed that we were able to get these fixed. So there you go. Hope this has helped you in seeing how we restore these 80-year-old shutters.